So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, Challenge and Change the Foundations of Agile. Thank you everyone for joining. So real quick before we get started, a quick intro for myself here. My name's Andre Simones. I'm a software engineer, Agile coach, trainer. I've been flipping all between those things for quite a while. I started in software development in '97. Then went to Agile in 2004, worked for a little company called Intuit, and when I started, it was started really small, just started with Agile requirements, and we couldn't estimate. We didn't know how to estimate. We didn't know when we'd be done with anything, and so I just bought a book called Agile Estimating and Planning by Mike Cohn. If you don't already have that, I suggest you buy it. It's still quite valid, even though it was written in 2004. And then that led me on the journey to Scrum. And I've been on the journey ever since. I continue to learn. There's always something new that I learn from everybody I talk to. So this webinar here, there's some ideas that I have. I just want to convey to everyone that I've kind of picked up recently, and I hope it's informative for everyone else. So in this webinar, so here's the overview. So I want to talk about what Agile is, and I'm going to spend a bit of time on this. I know probably a lot of people have heard this over and over again. Hopefully this will be a little bit of a different twist. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I see many companies who say we want to go Agile, and then they're surprised. It's nothing what they expected. They thought we just use Post-it notes and we're Agile now. It's quite different, and I just want to get that out there, and also what it's not. I also want to talk about why understanding why you're doing Agile is important. Many times teams, companies will go Agile because everybody else is going Agile, and there isn't. You really need to have an understanding of what your real goals are in going Agile. Typically those are related to business goals, which we'll talk a little bit about. How to get started. There's typical adoption patterns when it comes to Agile. There's ways that companies start, and also there's ways that you can start kind of in the small, as opposed to the big bang, so to speak. What to expect. What to expect is, I'm going to kind of talk about this throughout. Again, like I said earlier, many times companies are surprised when they go Agile because they didn't see the challenges that would be coming up. So we'll talk about that throughout, and then finally we'll be talking about anti-patterns, things that you might recognize, and some things that you can do about them. These anti-patterns are very common that I've seen multiple teams, multiple companies struggle with. So first thing, let's talk about what is Agile. So there's a difference between doing Agile and being Agile. Agile really is a mindset. So there's something called the Agile Manifesto. It's at agilemanifesto.org, and that's a definition. It lists the values and the principles. Now, these values and principles are guided through practices. It's hard to implement values and principles in an organization. So luckily for us, there's been some people that have developed some frameworks for us that we could use to kind of move us from the right here, from just doing Agile, hopefully, to being Agile. The most common, of course, is Scrum, that many people are trying to implement anyway. So really, Agile is the mindset, but there's a lot of different frameworks that exist that provide the practices to be able to become Agile. The most popular is Scrum. Typically, without most people knowing it, the next most popular is Extreme Programming. Extreme Programming provides guidance such as test-driven development. User stories come from Extreme Programming. That's not part of Scrum. Scrum is extremely lightweight, doesn't talk anything about engineering practices. Then we have these other frameworks. Some of you may have heard of SAFe, scaled Agile framework. And that's really an enterprise-wide kind of a solution there. Now, Scrum is technically part of SAFe. So they're kind of intermingled, and they all support the Agile mindset. So let's talk about the manifesto for a bit here. Now, I'm assuming some kind of, and hopefully this is a somewhat correct assumption, I'm assuming some kind of experience with Agile. You've probably heard the Agile Manifesto, and you've probably had some experience with Scrum. So I'm assuming not just starting from square one. So apologize if that's not the case for everyone here. So one of the things when looking at the manifesto, and one of the things that I honestly have kind of ignored for many, many years, is the first sentence when you go to the website, and how important that really is. I've kind of focused just on the values and the principles themselves, which of course are important. But the first sentence, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. So uncovering, that word is pretty powerful right there, because that means that they're still discovering better ways of developing software. It's not a static thing at all. So, and how are they doing this? They're doing it, they're actually building software, and they're helping others do it. And by the way, if you do have, sorry, just a side note, if you do have a question, just raise your hand and throw it in the chat, and hopefully I will see it. So I want to, and also I'd like to have this be as interactive as possible in this next hour. So I'm going to be asking some questions, so I'd appreciate it if you know, you could participate just by putting stuff in the chat. That'd be great. So let's talk about how some of these principles here, what effect they might have on an organization that's new to Agile. So I want to kind of get your ideas. So let's talk about this second one here, which is pretty profound, to be honest, and it's a big deal to organizations that are moving from a traditional environment to an Agile environment. Welcome changing requirements even late in development. So what kind of, who do you think this would impact the most? Number one. Let's see in the chat. Nobody's participating, huh? Okay, unless we have questions. I'm looking in the chat and I don't see anything here. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep going then. I apologize, everyone. I'm not sure if we're having technical difficulties or not. So welcoming changing requirements it typically impacts the software development team, right? So every process that typically exists in a traditional environment is against this. It is opposite of this. It is opposite of welcoming changing requirements, especially late in development. Now, of course, we have to use common sense, and we can't say, you know, oh, it's the day of the release, let's change a requirement. And Agile doesn't mean to do that. So imagine the impact it could have on teams that now have to change their mindset on welcoming changing requirements. We all know requirements change. It's just that typically we don't want to expect it or accept it. Another thing to look at here too is the principle: business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. In a traditional environment in particular, typically there's liaisons, a lot of liaisons. I'm not sure if I'm saying that word right. I'll assume I am. Liaisons that are put in between the various roles, in particular software developers. And sometimes they're very necessary. But sometimes this can create impediments. So this is saying business people and developers must work together daily. Oh. Thanks, Alex. Please open the question tab. Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong tab, but I can't. I apologize, folks. Let me see here. There is a chat window. If everybody sees that on, I'm going to send a message out to the group. I'm not able to expand my questions window. So, hello. Okay, I'll keep an eye on this chat window. If not, we'll just, and Alex, I cannot expand my questions window on the go-to. It's tiny. Oh, okay. Alex, I know we can hear your voice. If you see a question, can you just throw it out there if somebody posts a question, because I can't see it on my end. I appreciate that. Okay. So sorry about that, folks. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. So this means that the software developers, for instance, should talk to those customers directly, as opposed to, for instance, a business analyst that talks to them and then provides documentation to the software developer. So the impact can be quite large. And you can expect some resistance, of course, right? Because software developers, especially in a traditional environment, they're used to getting their requirements through documentation. Folks, the technical difficulties have been solved. Alex has come to the rescue. I can see the questions window now. Thanks, Alex. All right, great. Sorry about that. Hopefully this will be the last technical interruption that is completely my fault. So this can cause some difficulty, and also software developers, I'm just picking on them right now. Software developers want to develop. That's what they want to do. That's, you know, so sometimes they feel like it's kind of beyond their scope of responsibility to actually talk to the business. However, you're increasing the fidelity of a requirement quite a bit when they do talk to them directly, but it's going to be difficult. Not only because it's difficult because maybe the team members aren't used to talking to the business folks, but also because you might ask, what's the role of the business analyst? And depending on the organization, I mean, there's a huge role for the business analyst, and they can really work together with the customer. This one here is related to the last one we talked about. I want to talk about this middle one. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information is face-to-face conversation. We all know this, right? If I talk to you face-to-face, it's a lot easier than you documenting something, me and reading it, because now I've got to interpret it and figure out what you meant. This is a habit that's hard to get out of. So you can imagine that when people all of a sudden need to change kind of, oh, I'm going to email this person, or I'm going to write a document for this person, to actually talk to them, that's a change in behavior that also could cause a little bit of consternation potentially, right? Especially if you have functional teams that, you know, I build my requirements document and I give it to the software development manager, and then he gives it to whoever that I don't know who he's giving it to, so I don't talk to them. This is the biggest one, and we'll talk about this more a little bit in a little bit. Self-organizing teams. It is recognized, it has been recognized for decades that the most efficient way to deliver, to build things, is through self-organizing teams. And I'm going to get into more detail about that, but in a little bit. But self-organizing teams is kind of the core, if you will, of a lot of this. It's teams that are autonomous, that can that are cross-functional, that can communicate and do what needs to be done the right way to be able to deliver software. And that can have quite a bit of an impact also. And this probably, I would say, is the most challenging piece to a company transitioning to an Agile mindset. Just a really quick Cliff's Notes review of Scrum. It's really kind of I look at it as kind of three main pieces. You start on the left with an idea. It goes into a list of things you have to do to deliver. So, and this is the list of things that the team needs to build to deliver on that idea. It goes into the development cycle. So the middle, where you see the daily Scrum and the green circular arrows, that's the team. The team works on that. The product backlog, the business puts the items in the product backlog. They know what the customers want, and they say, here's what we need to deliver to our customers. The team implements that, and then at the end you have working software. Working software that ideally would actually be put in production right away. We know that's not reality, but at least you have working software that you can wash your hands off, check it off, and say, this can go into any release that we want it to. It is ready to go, and we never have to look at that again. So Agile is not, so we talked about Agile as a mindset, right? It's defined by some practices, but this is kind of some of the confusion, some of the things that I've seen that people need to understand what they're getting into when they adopt Agile. It is not a silver bullet. I don't hear a lot of people talk about this anymore, and way back when, in the early 2000s, when Scrum in particular was introduced, they always said, it is not a silver bullet. It will not solve your problems. It all depends on how you use it. So just because you say we're doing Agile doesn't mean that all of your problems are going to magically go away. It's up to you. It's not a predefined process to follow. It's not a checklist. Like, first you do step A, and then we do these things. There's like, for instance, Scrum has activities like a planning session that you do every 2 weeks or so. But that's it. That's the extent of it. It's not just daily stand-ups. If you do daily stand-ups, that doesn't mean you're Agile. There's very, very command and control waterfall organizations that still do daily stand-ups. Just because you use Post-its doesn't mean you're Agile. And yes, somebody actually said that to me. They said, we're Agile, we use Post-its. Good for you, but that doesn't really mean anything. You might be doing demos to stakeholders. That is awesome. All these things are awesome, by the way. They're great things, but it doesn't mean you're Agile. It's not a recipe to solve every problem that you have. Over and over and over again, I'm asked, for instance, here's some common sample questions. How do I create a test strategy in Agile? What does Agile say about that? It doesn't say anything about it. How do we manage our portfolio? Agile doesn't say anything about that either. How do we refactor our mainframe so we can put in some automated tests? What does Agile say about that? Nothing. So you get my point, right? What it gives you is a way of thinking so that you can solve your own problems. All of these problems are yours to solve. Many times it's said that Scrum is a way to identify the problems. So imagine the problems when you're trying to create a self-organizing team. Imagine the problems you're going to face. Scrum doesn't tell you how to solve those problems. It's really up to you. And this is one of those things that people really don't expect, that all of a sudden they can't do these seemingly simple things. And why is this not working? And it's not just for software development teams. It's not just an IT thing. It's for the entire organization. Software development is really, if you think about it, just a small piece of the puzzle on how you build something what you do to deliver something to a customer to make them happy and for you to make money. It's just a small piece. So a big mistake companies make many times is just thinking it's a software developer thing, and so they're the only ones that are going to do it. It will just collapse and crumble, and I'm sorry, it just won't work out very well for you. So let's talk about being agile. What does it mean to be agile? So as far as I can tell, and there's some other folks that I've known that have kind of affirmed this, I suppose. This is it. If you can do these things, you are well on your way. Number one, you need a well-formed, well-understood product backlog. That's what you deliver, or multiple product backlogs if you have multiple teams. You have a self-organizing cross-functional team with an established velocity. Velocity means throughput. You know how much this team can deliver in, let's say, 2 weeks. You know that they can deliver 10 things from that product backlog in 2 weeks. Now you can predict some things, right? So I'm going to throw a question out to you, and I have my questions window now. What do you think is needed for a team to have an established throughput? What's the main thing? I'm not good governance and people trained. Yep. Communication, absolutely. Customer, yep. Developers and QA, that is true. You do need all those. And I'm going to add the caveat. The main thing I was looking for was that you have to have an established team that's long-term. They stay together. You have to have that. So in a project-based organization where you have a project, you create your team, let's say it's an Agile team, it's cross-functional, and now the project's over, they're gone. So now all that learning, everything that you have together is gone. That velocity they've established, it takes some time to establish the throughput of that team. It's gone. Now you have now in the next project, you have a different team. So it's important to have teams that are in it for the long haul. The product backlog, real quick. The product backlog is nothing more than a set of items that the teams can that anchors the team, that the teams can deliver. They can create. Product back and they're focused on what is valuable to the customer. So let's say I have a job posting site, and one of the features is that for a job applicant, I need to be able to upload a resume. So uploading the resume. To upload the resume, sure, you're going to need a database. You're going to need some UI stuff. You're going to need some to code some things and all that stuff. Customer doesn't care about that. So it's always valuable to the customer. So you say, team, I want the job applicants to be able to upload their resume. And the team's going to ask questions, and there you go. They can really center around that. I'm not going to go, the invest is relatively self-explanatory. And there's another class that's a couple days where we only talk about Agile requirements. It's a 2-day class. Each item should be able to be done in a day or two, ideally. It's constantly refined. This is not a static document. And very importantly, it's prioritized. The team knows what's the most important thing to be worked on. Getting this is surprisingly hard because a lot of times companies that are transitioning from traditional to an Agile environment, a lot of this stuff is in multiple systems and in multiple people's heads. You don't really know exactly what should be next. So throw out questions. I'm trying to keep an eye on the questions tab here too. Okay. Self-organizing teams. I've talked mostly about this already. One of the things I did not talk about is that they're generalizing specialists. Some people, I've heard this referred to as T-shaped people, I believe is what it's called, T-shaped roles, I guess. So if I'm a software engineer, that's not all I do, right? It could be that, you know what, I know how to test some stuff. I know how to write automated acceptance tests. That's typically the responsibility of the QA team. I could help with that. Or maybe I could help with dissecting some business requirements, and let's meet with the business folks. Maybe I could help with that. Maybe the business analyst could help with writing some test cases, quite possibly, right? So the team can come together and share responsibilities. They're not boxed in by their own process. They're autonomous enough to be able to define their own process. So if you try to have a cookie cutter process that every team will exactly follow, like you will have a code review every Tuesday at 3 p.m. and you have to do this, and if you don't do it, we're going to punish you, that's a problem. The team may say, we do pair programming and we're good. You know, we don't need to do that. They have to be autonomous enough to do that. They have to have they share their goal, which is typically centered around the product backlog. Cross-functional means it has everybody needed that can deliver a piece of working software. Has to be small too. I've never seen a team that has shrunk down that didn't become more efficient, and I suspect other people have seen this too. Traditional team structure, we've all seen this. We'll just, you know, business analysis, development QA. Now we change it. Now this is team one is your new team. You have BAs, developers, and QA folks on there, all working together, ideally sitting together. When you create a self-organizing team centered around a product backlog that's probably part of a project, if you're coming from a more traditional organization, you can expect some things here. First thing you should expect, this is called the Tuckman's model of team performance. And this has been around for a long time, and this is used in other contexts too, but it's been so helpful to me to understand where the team is. So when you assemble a team for the first time, they probably are, you know, maybe they've worked together before, but they've never, or they know each other, but they've never worked together before. So now they get to work together face to face. I don't have to just email them or put in a ticket or whatever. I get to tell them what's going on, and we get to collaborate together. And they're getting used to each other. This is just a normal thing. You know, usually software developers, for instance, are used to working with other software developers. That's just kind of how that happens. So there's going to be a little bit of figuring out how do I coordinate and collaborate with these other folks. Then after that forming happens, you move into this phase where you're storming. You start having disagreements. You start having conflict. And this is actually a good thing. Storming is good. You don't want to stay there forever. Sometimes teams get into a storming phase and they never get out. So this is really where it's up to leadership to help guide them through that storming phase, where they can figure out how to pop out of that and become norming and norming. Figured it out. They're not arguing all the time, let's say, like a family. And then they really are performing where they're just constantly improving. They're committed to improving themselves as a team. Does that mean there won't be conflict? Of course not. Conflict is healthy. It's how you can make decisions. It's how you come up with new ideas. I'm sure all of you, as I have had an idea, and I've disagreed, and somebody's disagreed with me. I learned something, they learned something, we meet in the middle and we move on. It's a great thing. What's needed though to have the self-organizing teams is you have to change your leadership style. And this is also a surprise to people. So I say this to people and they're like, yeah, I get it, it's no problem. I can't tell people, I can't order people around, for instance. In servant leadership, which is yet another course. There's a lot that could be said about servant leadership, but there's some great books out there too. You can't just order people around and make sure that they, you know, do what you told them to do. You've got to, you come from a place of you're helping, you're mentoring them, you're asking questions, and you let them decide what the best thing to do is. That's probably the hardest thing to do. The team has to be empowered. They're autonomous, which I talked about earlier. They do have constraints. So, of course, we're going to have budgetary constraints. Sometimes you're going to have constraints of, like, let's say a tool. Could be a tool. You have to use Jira. Everybody uses Jira. Okay, fine. We'll use Jira. However, if there is a problem and the team can see an improvement by not using Jira, they should be empowered enough to be able to take that to the appropriate levels of the organization to make a case for that. And they should feel confident that they can do that without any repercussions whatsoever. All right, let's talk about why, understanding why. Why are you doing Agile? So let's talk a little bit about when, because this is important too. This is called the Stacy matrix. This has been used in many different contexts. The context that this is used here is typically the Scrumists will use this to show, like, when is Scrum, where is Scrum best fit? Where is the sweet spot, okay? So on the x-axis, we have the requirements, or sorry, the technology. On the y-axis, we have requirements. Close to certainty on both axes are the points at the on the left here on the x-axis. Technology certain, requirements are certain, and then of course far from certainty on both of those. When you have things that are in the simple zone, does it really matter what you do? You know what the requirements are. You know exactly. Everybody knows what they are. You know what the technology is. There's no new technology. It's technology we've had for 20 years. I know exactly how to do this. So simple. Do you really need to adopt Agile? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe technical practices at best? Don't know. But that's something to consider. As you move away from that, this big orange middle, that's the complex area where things aren't so certain. Maybe you have to try new technologies that you've never used before. Maybe you have to build a new product because your customers are clamoring for it. You don't know that. And so you don't really know these things. This is where Scrum, that's where the sweet spot really is, where these things aren't necessarily known. And in the upper right corner, we have chaos. Some say that, you know what, it's the death march. There's nothing that's going to help. You know, good luck to you. I would argue, though, that it's definitely an opportunity to bring in some of the ideas, some of the mindset, and some of the values and principles, and it could definitely help expose why you have chaos. Like I said earlier, Agile won't fix your problems, but it can expose their problems to you. Every time I've helped a chaotic organization or a chaotic team, they don't know what their problems are. So let's go ahead and, so in that case, you're implementing Agile potentially just to see what your problems are. And it completely, then you can know what you should do, or at least have data to help make decisions. There's a State of Agile report that version 1, there's a tool called version 1, and they were recently purchased by CollabNet. This is hot off the presses, the 12th annual State of Agile report. And this is why people are adopting Agile. Now, one thing to note here is that the respondents they can check multiples. So once they've adopted Agile, say, yes, so we want to accelerate software delivery, and they can have multiple selections. And there's more than this. I just picked the top 5. So it's interesting here that most people are saying, we want to deliver faster. That's it. And so that's typically what I think, evidently according to this, a lot of people or most people are looking at just deliver faster. I'm surprised that enhanced software quality isn't up there personally, but I think there's still a misunderstanding, because many times there's this misunderstanding that Agile means lower quality, and it's not true. You can go faster and have higher quality. So let's talk about business goals, why you would want to do Agile. And one reason could be predictability, meaning we make commitments, we never meet them. We can't do this anymore. Our customers hate our guts, and we need to figure out when we need to be able to say we can deliver it by a certain time. Potentially risk reduction, which I know is a surprising thing to say, but imagine you're in a highly regulated environment and you've got to do certain things. If you're a government contractor, if you have HIPAA requirements, or whatever it happens to be, you have to manage that risk from an audit, for instance. You've got to do certain things, but then also you want to be able to deliver quickly and with high quality. The main way to reduce risk, and this is for everybody out there in every scenario, is to increase communication, not decrease it. A lot of times people will say, well, we're gonna reduce risk, so we're gonna put more documentation requirements, and we're gonna put more tools in, and that may not be the case. And cost savings, sure, of course, right? You know, we spend too much money on what we do. Quality, we talked about. Time to market, we need to deliver faster. Our customers are getting mad. We have competitors. And then also, could be innovation. Could be any one of these things. So how you start Agile, I mean, it could, if you say that we want to reduce cost, how you implement Agile might be a little bit different than if it's innovation and you want to discover new ideas, right? With innovation, it's fluid. You want to experiment. You want to throw stuff out. Then maybe it's not the best built, but you want to get feedback as quickly as possible. So let's look at an example on, let's say we have a business goal of reducing time to market. Well, it's also, I would suggest you just scratch the surface a little bit. And why aren't we able to deliver more quickly? Why does it take 18 months for a feature to get out to our customers? Consistently, no matter what we do, you know, we can't go out faster. So when you start digging one level deeper, you see, oh, wait a minute, our software development team is really slow. And it could be, and how do you know this? Because you asked them. Yeah, we're really slow. And it could be because, well, the systems they're in, I've worked in environments where they had old laptops and it took 20 minutes to compile every little change. Could be little things like that. Teams are working on too many things at once. There's too many number one priorities. That could be the main problem. That's going to inform you on how to address this problem. Let's focus on prioritizing, like we talked about with the product backlog. Maybe things are stuck in user acceptance testing. It's the black hole and users are too busy doing their day jobs. So it takes too long and it's just there for months and months, and it's hard to get sign off. Maybe it's a release issue. Maybe you have yearly releases. It's not uncommon. There are companies who have yearly or maybe even longer releases. So then you got to wait for the train to leave. And then also, if releases too infrequent, imagine the pile of code you have going in. That's a huge amount of risk. Maybe you want to improve quality. There's just too many bugs. Customers aren't happy with the bugs. Well, maybe it's because requirements are incomplete. Well, let's focus on communication and the product backlog. Maybe our environments are inconsistent. They're completely different. That causes problem. Maybe our testing process itself. Maybe that could be where we start, right? So my point in all of this is just scratch the surface, and then you can help address your more specific problems. And it's important to do this as opposed to just saying, we want Scrum. Well, why do you want Scrum? Let's talk about these things, and let's specifically address these lower level issues. Infrequent releases, by the way, are a big problem. So it causes a lot of problems. All right, let's talk about where to start. Again, just want to beat this drum. We have well-formed, well-understood product backlogs. We have self-organizing teams, tested working software, and dependencies are actively identified and minimized. And the thing about, and I'm not going to talk a lot about dependencies here, but if I'm on a team and we can't get anything done until that other team does their stuff, that's a problem, right? And this is very, very common. So they can't be ignored. It cannot be ignored. You're not going to get any benefit unless you actively address dependencies. There's some typical adoption patterns that I've seen, and these are pretty common. They're pretty common sense. There's the enterprise agile where the CEO or the one of the leaders says, let's do this. We're going all out. We're going to go all out. Scrum, we're going to go all out. XP, whatever it happens to be. We're doing this, and if you don't like it, get out. That happens. My understanding is Salesforce did this years ago, and they were kind of at a critical point in their history, and the CEO said, yeah, we can't do this anymore. We're going to go Scrum, and it was, you know, shape up or ship out. This is what we're going to do. I'm not saying that should be the case. I'm not a proponent of that, but you know, time and money, and look at them now. They're doing great now. There's the grassroots agile, and sometimes it's almost a covert kind of a plan. It's like the team might say, we could do so much better. We can deliver better. Let's try some agile things. And this happened actually while I was at Intuit. There were some teams multiple teams that covertly and independently started adopting Scrum. And then leadership caught wind of it, and they're like, why are these teams doing so good? Oh, Scrum, what's that? And so eventually they rolled out Scrum training throughout the entire organization. So that grassroots effort had a huge impact. Piloting Agile is similar to the enterprise Agile in that it's coming from leadership, but they're going to start slow. It's not a big bang. It's not a shape up or ship out. It's like, well, let's try this. Let's try this and see what happens. So they might pick a project, and ideally, what do we talk about? You're going to have your product backlog. You're going to have a self-organizing team, right? And you're going to deliver working software. So that, and address dependencies. So that's going to be part of that pilot. And they need to be supported. And I would suggest, honestly, pick your hardest project, which again goes contrary to belief, or common belief. But I say pick a critical, mission critical project. If you can do those things I said, create the product backlog, self-organizing teams, and deliver software, it will lower the risk of that critical project, I promise you. And then there's Rescue Agile. Remember that chaos section I told you on that Stacy matrix? This is where people say, we don't know what to do. We help. We're going to close. Please help us. And really, this is a tricky one because Agile isn't necessarily going to work for you, but at least you can discover your problems and you can make some important decisions. Considering where to start, the business goals for adopting Agile. Think about that. What are your business goals? And dig a little bit deeper, like I talked about earlier. What's your current organizational structure, your company size, whether you have leadership support and leadership transformation. That means does leadership, have they transformed to an Agile mindset? Or do they not know it and not understand it? They can support it and not understand it, and that can still be problematic. And then, what's your current culture? So these are important things on knowing where to start. Some examples. So we have ACME. So I'm going to set up the scenario here. So the reason they want to adopt Agile is improving quality. I didn't scratch the surface here to the lower level just because it's an example. Leadership support, their support is only improve quality or else, and that's it. They understand a little bit about Agile, but not necessarily a lot. They're just, do whatever you need to do, whatever it is. So it's not really support. Organizational structure, traditional, heavily siloed functional groups that communicate only via documentation, and that's what they've been doing for years and years. Big company, older company that's change resistant. So what are some options, right? So an option is, well, what's the adoption pattern? So the adoption pattern, it's not probably enterprise agile because the leader doesn't care. But he says fix your quality. So this could be a combination between a piloting and a grassroots effort, right? So you can accept that and move on from there. How small? So what could you do to start small? So we got to improve our quality, right? Well, quality. What if quality? The reason we have quality issues is because we don't understand our requirements and we keep building the wrong thing. Okay. Well, what's the smallest thing we can do? Create a product backlog. Right, and you could start there. That's it. Nothing but creating a product backlog. We could try to pilot it. Get leadership support. Talk to that leader. Have them buy in to help, because the teams can't create a self-organizing cross-functional team themselves. You have to have leadership support to do that. So try piloting it. Also, it's important to have somebody that can help the team in Scrum. That's called the Scrum Master. But it could be anybody that just figures out how, let's move stuff. If we can get that cross-functional team together somehow, let's move everything out of their way so they can move forward, right? So if you just said, let's do Scrum in this company, it would probably fail because there's too much of a culture shock to do that. So in starting small is the most important thing you could do here. Now, by contrast, we have another company. So the reason they want to adopt Agile is they have a lot of competitors, and they're really afraid they're going to be pushed out of the market. And things are changing a lot, so they're afraid they're gonna lose their lead in the industry. So they have high leadership support. They're like, do it. You got my support. But they don't understand Agile. Maybe they don't care. Organizational structure is fluid. Everybody wears a lot of hats, and it's a small company. But the culture is cowboys, heroes, and firefighters, and it's completely chaotic. Just everybody's running around with their hair on fire. So this is another scenario. Well, in this case, so the adoption pattern, it's really enterprise Agile. I mean, you could say it's a lot of those, you know, as we talk through these things, all four of those. But you could get that if you say this is an enterprise-wide Agile adoption pattern. We need that leadership support. We need him to or her to understand. So let's go ahead and, you know, make sure they understand it and they support it. This might be a place where you do Scrum. You just do Scrum. And you just kind of lay that like a blanket over the entire thing, and you just do that. And that could help bring order to chaos along with some technical practices with a heavy focus on customer feedback loops. Get stuff out into production really, really fast, right? So see how these two companies could say, we want Agile, but the implementation could be completely different. All right, let me do a time check. All right. So I'm wrapping up. Last piece here, the anti-patterns. So first of all, this first slide here is on the anti-patterns. It's just not having any of these. If you're doing Agile, these are all anti-patterns, right? So you don't have a product backlog. You can't do Agile if you don't. No self-organizing team. You don't have that. So you know, you can't do Agile unless you have that. Can't deliver working software. What's the point? And there's just too many dependencies. So each one of these should be addressed. So I would suggest that you start at the top of the list. Let's make backlogs. Let's do nothing but make backlogs. Let's write our requirements in such a way to meet the INVEST guidelines, to make sure they're, you know, negotiable, they're smaller, and they're focused on customer value, not development tasks. Just start there. And that will be surprisingly difficult if you're coming, well, actually from any kind of company, whether it's old, new, doesn't matter. That is surprisingly difficult. Once you get a backlog, let's focus then on self-organizing teams. So this is like your checklist. This could be your going Agile roadmap right here. Create backlogs, done, and just move on. All right. Agile is just, so another anti-pattern, Agile is just for software developers. Result of this is you have a lot of changing priorities because nobody cares about upstream from software development. They're just constantly changing. I got a new idea. Let's go ahead and bring it to the team. You have malformed product backlogs or no product backlogs, and there's really little to no improvement because the software developers are the team is kind of helpless. They can't really do anything about the changing priorities and not knowing what to work on. So this is where you create cross-functional teams centered around a goal. And it doesn't have to mean organizational change or anything like that. Just form your teams. And then facilitate brainstorming sessions with the software developers and the business. Get them just talking together. People are in multiple teams. This is huge, and this should never be ignored. Let's say you're in an Agile environment or any environment. I'm on multiple teams. If I'm on 4 teams, and this happens all the time, and if I'm on 4 teams, that means I have 4 daily meetings I have to go to. I have 4 sprint planning sessions or whatever it is I have to go to. So it just needs to stop. The result is you extend, people multitask, you extend timelines. Things take longer, they just do. You have unfinished work. If I'm on 4 teams, I'm just gonna do the bare minimum because I want to spend time with my family, you know. Then they're demotivated, and there's just so much high meeting overhead. So one option is to not require everyone to stay in their lane, so to speak, but help people share tasks. You know, I'm a business analyst, but nobody else can do it. But I got to be in this other team. Maybe a QA person on that other team could say, "Could I do that stuff?" Great. You know, commit to maybe in a functional area or in a project, make a commitment. Leadership will need to be involved with this, that everyone on this one team, just this one team, is 100% allocated. They're on nothing else, no other teams. And just start small. Starting small is super important. And just identify impediments and address one at a time. Handoff silo mentality. I've seen teams, even when they have they're sitting together, potentially even, they will still communicate by documentation. It's overhead, right? You got to get people out of their comfort zones. This is into that forming thing that we talked about. So there needs to be some facilitation across functional groups where people can learn to get rid of this handoff silo mentality. Let's say the Scrum Master or management tells the team what to do. They're not servant leaders, right? This demotivates the team. The team stops caring. They can't innovate. And there's this thing called malicious compliance where they'll just do whatever the boss tells them, even if they know it's wrong. See it all the time. So really needs to be some servant leadership training and coaching preferably. And then the team can manage up and help that manager really, help them understand the impact that it has. And that takes a lot of courage right there. And then probably the most egregious one is everybody's been trained, let's start. So you attend a Scrum training. Everybody does. Say, go. Everybody, you're Agile now. I've never seen this work ever. And it's typically a cause for people to say Scrum doesn't work. Well, it's hard. All these changes from traditional to Agile is super hard. So that's really where we need a coach and an internal evangelist. And I think I've gone past my time probably. Ooh, I'm right at my time. I was hoping to leave more time for questions. I'm sorry I kind of flew through that stuff. And so I want to ask, do you have questions? Let's hear it. Looking. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, and thank you for the great presentation. And yes, Agile approach can be used as a proof of concept. Absolutely, love it. Okay, well, thank you everyone. We'll get the recording sent out along with the slides. I appreciate your time, and everyone have Have a great Wednesday. All right. Bye.